I am a huge fantasy fan. I'm talking the earliest books that captured my heart and my imagination, the books that made me a reader as a child and have kept me a reader my entire life. My number one most read genre every single year is fantasy. I love it so much, and I love all of its many flavors. But something has come to my attention in the last couple years, mostly from all of you letting me know that there are some major names in the fantasy space, some really popular, much-loved authors that I have never read. Authors like Brandon Sanderson, Joe Abercrombie, and Robin Hobb. And up until relatively recently, I would say the last 2 years or so, that wasn't intentional. There wasn't any particular reason for it. I just wasn't coming across their books as much. They weren't the ones featured in my local bookstore. My friends who also read fantasy weren't into their books. But to be totally honest with you, in the last couple years, it has become a little personal because not only do I see these names everywhere all the time, not only do I see a huge amount of hype, people saying that these are the greatest authors in the fantasy space, their books are their favorite fantasy books of all time, their series are the best fantasy series to exist on the planet. Also the fact that these three authors in particular have huge backlogs and tend to write pretty long series that are intimidating to jump into as someone who generally am a fan of shorter series, you know, a duology, a trilogy, and I love a good standalone fantasy. It's a little intimidating and it's a little stressful because it feels like there's a lot of pressure that I'm putting on myself to love their books, but also from the community that loves them so much. And I don't want to let people down by reading these authors finally and finding that they're not for me. But recently I realized that life is short. I want to read great fantasy and I don't want to put extra pressure on myself unnecessarily and stress myself out about things that don't really matter. So I've decided to start a bit of a series diving into these authors, focusing on one author per video and giving them a chance, documenting my experience of reading their work for the first time and how it lands with me and what my experience is like. Now you already know, because you clicked on this video, that I am starting off with Robin Hobb and I'm starting with the Farseer Trilogy. I did a lot of research into where I should start, and many people were telling me that this was the series to start with and that these three books, Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest, were the books to start with. So I'm trusting you. And that's what I'm doing. So for this video, I'm going to read the Farseer Trilogy and see what I think. Experience Robin Hobb's prose for the first time, her world building, her character development, magic systems. Like I said, I've heard so many good things. So many people rave about Robin Hobb over the years, and I'm finally going to find out for myself if she really deserves to be so lauded in fantasy spaces. I feel like even just from the covers of these, they feel very old school fantasy. They feel nostalgic, even though I've never read them, just because the cover design reminds me so much of so many of the fantasy novels that I read as a kid in the 90s and the 2000s, so many of which I just don't even remember anymore. They've just totally dissipated into the background of my childhood. But Assassin's Apprentice is book one. It's the smallest of the three, so that's kind of Hobb to ease us in a little bit. This one is coming in at under 400 pages, so that's pretty short and cute for a fantasy novel. My understanding is that the Farseer Trilogy is the first trilogy within a much longer series that is made up of many shorter series that all take place in the same world that you can read in a variety of orders depending on your preference, which is another reason why I've held off on getting into her work, because it just seems a little complicated, to be totally frank, but cool. You know, if you really like a world, it's awesome to get to continue to exist in it for a long period of time. There are many fantasy authors I love that I wish they would just keep writing more and more and more books in a particular world, because I just want to live there forever. So I get it. Anyway, here's the blurb for the first book in this series. The kingdom of the Six Duchies is on the brink of civil war when news breaks that the crown prince has fathered a bastard son and is shamed into abdication. The child's name is Fitz, and he is despised. Raised in the castle stables, only the company of the king's fool, the ragged children of the lower city and his unusual affinity with animals provide Fitz with any comfort. To be useful to the crown, Fitz is trained as an assassin, and to use the traditional magic of the Farseer family, but his tutor, allied to another political faction, is determined to discredit, even kill him. Fitz must survive, for he may be destined to save the kingdom. There you have it. This really feels like old school fantasy. When did this come out, actually? When was this published? 1995. So makes sense. This easily could have been a series that I was reading as a kid. It could have been part of my childhood lore, but it wasn't. I never came across Robin Hobb somehow. So I'm excited to dive in. I hope it does give me all of those nostalgic 90s, 2000s fantasy vibes that just make up so much of my childhood reading. That would be amazing. So I'm going to go off and read the first chapter. I'll be back probably in the morning to let you know what I think of it, and then I'll continue reading to the halfway point before I check in again. I'm really excited for this. Let me know if you're excited for this series as well. Let me know if there are any other authors you'd want me to do this for. Also, they don't have to be fantasy authors because obviously I read across many, many genres and many of you do as well. So that's what we're doing for this video. Let me know your suggestions in the comments for more videos like this one. And I'm going to stop rambling and just go read now. Hello and good morning. I have read the first chapter of Assassin's Apprentice and I'm excited to share my initial thoughts, my first reactions with you. But before we hop in, I did want to take a quick second to thank this video's sponsor, Farseer. This video is very kindly sponsored by Farseer, and I'm excited to share with you about their FAQ 202 LED face mask. So a little bit of background first, in case you don't know my entire life story. I am in my early 30s, and for most of my life, I didn't think about my skin much outside of concern about breakouts. Everyone lied to me because I was constantly told that I had to deal with bad breakouts until I was out of my teen years, and then I would have clear skin forever. Where? When? Not me. I still get breakouts every single month. So that has really been my major concern. But I will say that as a creator, as a YouTuber, I am forced to look at my own face far more than is healthy or normal for anyone. I have to spend hours and hours and hours editing videos of myself talking to camera every single week. And while I think I've done a pretty good job of staying level-headed and not getting too obsessive or self-critical, you do notice little changes much more quickly when you are looking at yourself that much. And especially when I hit my 30s, it just felt like something shifted. And because it's really important to me to embrace my own natural face, I want to let myself age naturally. I want to embrace all of my features that come from generations of my family who I love and respect. It's important to me not to submit to pressure to change my appearance through surgery or injections. So for me, it was really important to find more natural ways to take care of my skin and to feel my best. Aging is a privilege and a gift. I hope I get to grow old with all my loved ones. I do also think it's okay and probably very normal to want to hold on to your youth a little bit longer, to feel like you look like yourself as long as you can, and just to keep your skin happy and healthy. So a few years ago when I first noticed some of those shifts, I did some research and I ended up buying the Farseer Bear Mini, and I love this thing. I've been using it for years. So when Farseer reached out and asked if I was interested in trying their FAQ 202 LED face mask, I was intrigued to say the least, and I have loved using this over the last couple months. The FAQ 202 is an FDA cleared new generation LED face mask. It's made with unique flexi fit silicone molded to fit any face shape for even light coverage. It's ultra lightweight, very comfortable to wear, and wireless, so you can wear it while you do stuff around your house. You don't have to be chained to your bathroom. I love to wear mine while I'm reading, while I'm cozy and comfortable. Multitasking for the win. The FAQ 202 LED face mask comes comes with 8 different wavelengths, including NIR, and these different wavelengths can be used to target different skin concerns from aging to breakouts to dullness, sunspots, wrinkles, elasticity. The list goes on and on and on. And for me right now, like I said, my focus really is on breakouts, on the clarity of my skin, on keeping inflammation down and redness down. But I'm also starting to be more aware of the early signs of aging in my skin. And I love that I can continue to use this mask over the years and use it for different purposes as my skin changes. I have really noticed a change in my skin since starting to use this mask. My hormonal breakouts that come around at the same time every single month are not as severe, and it feels like my skin is clearing up faster, healing faster. So I'm very impressed, to say the least. The mask is super easy and convenient to use. I've been using FAQ red light peptide serum along with it, very lightweight, hydrating. And once I'm done with my treatment, I just use the silicone cleaning spray to make sure it's nice and clean before I store it so it's ready to use next time. I also love that I look like a Power Ranger when I wear it. Childhood dreams fulfilled. Farseer is having amazing holiday deals right now, so it's the perfect time to grab your gifts. Click the link in my description and use my code 35bride for 35% off almost all products. The code is stackable on sale items too, so don't miss out on this great offer. Thank you again to Farseer for sponsoring this video. So now let's chat about the first chapter of Assassin's Apprentice. I'm going to try to keep this short because of course we have 3 books to read for this video, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot to say once more has happened, but I'm really liking this so far. Honestly, the main feeling I'm having is this really strong sense of nostalgia. Even though I have never read this series before, I've never read any Robin Hobb, it just reminds me so much of the fantasy that I was reading in my childhood, which makes sense. This came out in 1995, just has that vibe, and it immediately feels so comforting, like it's from my childhood, even though it's fresh and new. So I love that for me. Enjoying that, to say the least. I'm not 100% sold on our protagonist yet. Not that I dislike him or anything. He's fine. There's just something about the way the book starts as him presumably later in life reflecting on his childhood and some of the ways he's talking about himself and his experiences. There's just some sort of a disconnect for me, but I imagine because he is our protagonist, as I get to know him more and learn more of his story, I will grow to love him, or at least I hope that that will be the case. Since I'm such a character-driven reader, I really struggle with books where I don't connect to the main character or at least find them fascinating. The first chapter is only 17 pages, so we only can get so much. It does seem like we're kind of flashing back to get a little bit of his origin story, his childhood. It's definitely more of a slower, more reflective tone and feeling in the first chapter, so it doesn't necessarily immediately grab you with intense events and magic and battles and dragons or whatever. I don't actually know if there are dragons in this world. I don't know what the magic is. I know nothing. But it almost feels more like historical fiction so far, especially in the way that this first chapter is framed and how we're diving back into our main character's past to learn more about them. But like I said, it definitely feels very nostalgic and of its time. And I do have a soft spot for fantasy of this era. I like the implication already that our main character might end up having a close bond to animals. I hope that continues. As an animal lover myself, I'd be a fan. I'd be a fan of following a character who is just best buds with the animals. In the first chapter, it's not really his own choice, but he seems to embrace spending time with animals, so I would love that. It's a nice little point of characterization and a relatability point. This definitely didn't dampen my excitement for this. I am raring to go. I'm excited. I want to know what happens next. I want to learn about the magic. I want to learn more about the world, and I want to get to know our main character more so that I can really connect to him. Because like I said, so far, I'm not quite there yet, but I think I can get there. I think I can. So what else can I say? Oh, the writing style. The writing style is not overly descriptive or lyrical so far. It's relatively straightforward. It does have some moments with more imagery or symbolism, but it's definitely not overdone or overwrought. I do tend to like writing that tends more toward the really descriptive, possibly even lyrical or poetic, and I wouldn't necessarily describe this as that so far, but there have been a couple lines that have landed really nicely for me, so I'm hoping that continues. It doesn't have to be super lyrical, it can be more straightforward, that's fine, but I just like nice words strung together in a sentence. Who doesn't? Anyway, those are my initial thoughts. I'm going to stop because like I said, I'm talking about 17 pages. I'm going to read to the halfway point and then I'll come back with more substantial thoughts and feelings, and I'm excited. So Let's go. I'm halfway through Assassin's Apprentice, and weirdly, I feel like I have very little to say. I'm enjoying it. It's like there's no thoughts, just vibes. As the story has continued, I feel I've been growing to appreciate the writing more and more. I didn't dislike it in the first chapter, but it didn't leave much of an impression on me. And at this point, halfway through, I feel like I'm starting to really appreciate the fact that it's more elevated language for sure, but it is a lot more straightforward generally. And I think due to the structure of it being memories that our main character is having of his childhood once he's grown, it's not as richly descriptive as it could be. It's not in the present moment. And so it would maybe be odd if he was remembering all of those teeny tiny details. So I think it makes sense for it to be a little bit more hazy around the edges. It's very much focused on his own experience, his perspective, the things he paid attention to at the time. And obviously, as an adult, he can't turn the other way in his memory and see what was happening at the other side of the room, or notice things that would matter more to him as an adult, but that he wouldn't have thought to notice as a child. So I think that makes sense, but it definitely makes it a little bit less vivid and descriptive. Not to say that it isn't that at all, because it is, but maybe not quite as descriptive as a lot of epic fantasy can be. Again, not a bad or a good thing necessarily. For my own personal taste, my own preferences, I do prefer more description, so I would love even more. It's a little bit lacking in that department for me personally, but I think for most people this will be more than sufficient for description. I am just a fiend for very thorough, evocative descriptions that really conjure an image in my mind. There are definitely moments and scenes and places here that I can picture in my mind, but they are more roughly sketched out. Again, maybe a little more hazy, a little more dreamlike, which maybe makes sense if they are memories. I'm enjoying it. I think it's very easy to read. It's very, as much as there is not that much plot happening, it feels much more character driven than plot driven. It does feel like it's moving at a pretty steady pace. We are following Fitz. I believe he's around 6 at the beginning of the novel, and now halfway through, I think the last time we heard an update for his age, he was 14. So the years are passing relatively quickly. I definitely don't feel bored or like anything is too slow as I'm listening, even though, again, not that much is happening plot-wise. That's not really an issue for me. I'm not a hugely plot-driven reader generally. Obviously, I enjoy an interesting plot as much as the next person. It's just not the thing that I value most. I really am a character-driven reader, and I can enjoy a book that has basically no plot at all or very little plot and be happy. So I will say that I did expect this to be more plot-driven based on when it was published and the genre and the way people talk about it, and maybe it becomes more plot driven later on. I know this is an initial trilogy that is part of a much, much longer series that is made up of lots of smaller series within one world. So perhaps when you look at everything from a bird's eye view, there is a lot of plot happening. But at least this first book seems much more concerned with establishing our protagonist, making us care about him. And I think it's effective at that so far. I definitely feel that I know Fitz, and I definitely care about him. It feels like he's entered a little bit of his bratty teen era. I'm hoping that that doesn't last too long, and it's a bit of a phase he's in right now because he's gotten into drinking and kind of acting like a drunken asshole right now as this 14-year-old lad. So I'm kind of waiting for that era to pass by. Probably not unrealistic as a phase to go through, but I definitely connected to him a little bit more as a younger child who was very lonely, looking for a place to belong, looking for love and a parental figure and connection, and to feel that he has unconditional love from somewhere and has a purpose and has a place to belong, and that sort of bone deep loneliness that he was feeling earlier on, which it's not that that has left him, but he's spending less time ruminating on it. He's maybe less self-aware in this moment of his life, or allowing himself less vulnerability. I miss that a little bit, but obviously that's been established as a core of him, and this could be him trying on a persona to posture a little bit and to protect himself a bit from that pervasive feeling of loneliness. I wouldn't say there have been really any exciting, fast-paced, intense moments. There have been no battles. There have been no chases. I guess there was one moment where they rode horses pretty fast away from a village, but it didn't really give me that adrenaline feeling. Not every fantasy has to do that, but again, that was something that I sort of expected from this just based on everything. While I like the character development and I like the protagonist, I do wish we were getting more character development for the other characters. There's a bit, and there are some characters who are getting a lot more development than others. It kind of feels like, and maybe it's meant to be reflective of him really never making a lot of deep connections, and he just never learned that much or got that close to most of the people he was living around and interacting with on a day-to-day basis, but we just don't get that much about them at all. And it is making this world feel a little empty for me. And I'm really hoping that that shifts, because right now it does feel like Fitz exists with one or two people that he interacts with on a day-to-day basis, and then everyone else is an NPC or someone you conjure in a dream who doesn't really have a face and never says anything, but just is existing to fill things up and make it feel more realistic, and you couldn't remember them if you tried. And maybe that's meant to be intentional for a bunch of reasons to, reinforce his loneliness, the fact that he doesn't belong, his isolation, to reinforce that this is a memory and he's only really held on to the memories with the people who matter most. But as a reader, it does feel a touch empty. And I think I'm craving a little bit more development of some of these side characters, even some of the smaller characters who are just popping in here and there. I'm wanting to know a bit more about. I was also feeling early on that there were fewer female characters than I expected from a fantasy written by a woman, and also that I like to read in my books. And as it went on, we were introduced to more female characters, and it seems from the last 2 chapters or so that we might have a female character become much more prominent in the story, at least for the next several chapters. I don't know, there have been some really interesting women in and around the story who have been introduced and then just sort of disappear into the ether, and I just want to know more about them and see more of him interacting with them. I guess we'll see what happens and how it continues on. I don't know if there's any context to this being published in the 90s and whether Robin Hobb was trying to sort of lie by omission and pass herself off as a male author and write kind of more of a traditional male-centric coming-of-age fantasy story that would appeal to the audience that was largely reading fantasy in the 90s. Reading in general, readers have shifted so much in their demographic since I started reading, and fantasy used to be much more male dominated, both in authors and readership, whereas now fantasy is very, very heavily skewed to women and girls, and not just because of the advent of romantasy. Even non-romantic fantasy feels that it is much more heavily consumed by women, many more female authors who are popular in the space. And I do believe I've seen a couple articles recently talking about the fact that men and boys in general are reading significantly less fiction than women just across the board, which didn't used to be the case. So anyway, I don't know if that's part of it. And I don't know, as the series goes on, if we get more prominent female characters. I would love to see that. And in this book, I would just love to learn more about the women who are already in the periphery of the story and are interesting, but we're just not getting more development for them. There's a lot of substance abuse in this book, both for the adult characters that he is spending a lot of time with, but also for him. Again, he's a young teen and he's already drinking pretty heavily, I would say. And it's implied that he, at some point, is going to start using drugs. So that's an interesting through line, and I'm curious if this is going to be explored more in depth on a thematic level later on in this book or in the series. I think the world building is interesting so far, and I imagine in future books and as the series goes on, we'll explore even more of the world. I think the magic is interesting so far. It's definitely a very slow build. We're being introduced to magic in this world in a very gradual way, and just hearing little references to types of magic, or Fitz himself is noticing certain abilities that he has that have not been trained as of yet, or that he's being told not to use or not to admit to anyone that he can do these various things. So far that's sort of bubbling under the surface, but I'm very curious to see how magic will manifest itself in this world and how the skill works and what forging means. There's just sort of multiple strains or types of magic seemingly that are being hinted at. We're getting little teasers for it, but so far nothing too in-depth. I do like how each chapter starts with a little bit of, from one paragraph to a few pages of world building, just giving us a little bit more context for the world. I like that. I think it allows Hobb to info dump on us a little bit without it feeling really stilted or out of place, being dropped into dialogue between people who already know all of this and have grown up with it. I think it works for it to just be a separate little note, either directly to the reader or just something that Fitz is writing as part of this history of his life for more context in case whoever reads this in the future is less knowledgeable about the places and myths and important figures of history. So I like that. And thematically, like I said already, it is so much of a character-driven story, and it really so far seems very focused on these ideas of identity, belonging, loneliness, family. I'm getting the sense that there is going to be more here to do with duty and responsibility and possibly destiny. There's a little bit already diving into the intricacies of ruling a kingdom and how different members of the royal family have different philosophies and approach leading in different ways, and how effective different types of leadership are. So I wonder if that will come to play as well, of different types of leadership and more effective leadership and power in general. We don't have a lot of access to the experiences of the lower classes in this world, except for through one of his childhood friends who he still meets up with occasionally. And she does give a little bit more context and help sort of check Fitz when he is a little bit out of touch about what the average person is going through. But her part in the book so far is pretty minimal. So I'd be curious to see more in this book or in future books about the day-to-day lived experiences of the lower classes, because while Fitz is technically of the lower classes, he also has royal blood. Fitz has a very sheltered life in a lot of ways. I'm also not overly emotionally invested so far. Nothing has made me feel any really strong emotions. I like the characters. I want to know what happens next, but I'm not gripped. The most emotional I've been is over some of the animal cruelty that's happened so far in this book. So yeah. But we'll see. It feels like it's a negative review because I'm not really passionate and emotionally invested in this yet, but I am enjoying it. It's just more of a low-key, slow burn type enjoyment, which is also fine. And I have a feeling that it might ramp up as the story continues. So I'm going to go find out, and I'll tell you when I get to the end. Hi, I'm back. I finished Assassin's Apprentice. I have some thoughts to share. I honestly am feeling a bit conflicted about this one. I will say it picked up in the second half, got a little more intense, a little more action heavy. There was more plot happening and also more engaging overall. I was definitely more invested in the second half. And honestly, the last 3, 4, maybe 5 chapters, the last little chunk of the book was by far the most engrossing, the most fast-paced, and really drew me in. So, I don't know. I feel like the ending is kind of coloring my impression of the whole book. And like I said in the halfway update, there's nothing wrong with the much slower paced, much lower stakes, generally, tone that the book had, and its intense focus on Fitz and his experiences, his perspective. It just felt like something was missing, and in that last little chunk, it felt like what was missing slotted into place. We had those stakes, especially because, I mean, no spoilers in this part, but the title is Assassin's Apprentice, so you can assume that there might be assassins involved somehow. And considering that fact and the fact that the country they live in is being attacked regularly by outside forces and villages are being raided and people are being murdered, you'd just think there would be more stakes. But I can't say that I was especially concerned that our protagonist was ever at risk until the last section, when finally it felt like, come here. Oh my gosh. A yelly girl. Sorry. Cat parent duties came to call. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, I didn't really feel at any point like our protagonist was actually at risk until that last section, and then finally it felt like the weight, the seriousness of the things happening in this world, the political machinations, the bubbling potential wars, the various players trying to grasp power, and the fact that there are assassins afoot. And it felt finally like there was that gravitas, that weight, the stakes arrived. And I appreciated that. I thought the ending was exciting. I also felt, it's interesting, I don't know if it was intentional or not. I don't know if Robin Hobb just likes the mountain setting more than the more southern setting that most of the book takes place in. But as they are going on a journey to the mountain people closer to the end of the book, there are so many more descriptions. At least it felt like there were more, and that they were more descriptive. I felt like I was much more able to vividly imagine what the mountain folk looked like and what their villages looked like, what the landscape looked like, what their capital city looks like, the gardens, etc., etc. Even their clothing, I felt, was more described. And again, you could say that this is intentional, that Fitz was much more aware of and sort of imprinted the memories of this experience because it was his first time traveling there and everything was new to him and very different, sort of foreign feeling to him. And so it would stick up more in his mind than the life he had always led, in contrast to the life he was used to, the fashion, the decor, the way people look, the customs, the features of the landscape. And that makes sense logically. But I also, because I am not Fitz and I didn't grow up in any part of this world, I wanted just as much description of the locations that we spent the vast majority of the book as the place that we visit just briefly at the end. And also, it's possible that it wasn't intentional. It's possible that Robin Hobb just preferred writing those passages, got a little carried away with the description in that section. I don't know her life, I don't know her motivations, but I'll note that. I also felt like the writing started to become a little bit more, not flowery, but a little more lyrical, even a little bit more elevated than it was in the beginning. Again, could be an attempt at an indication of Fitz growing older and becoming more well-spoken, becoming more eloquent in his own speech as he reaches his mid-teens versus being a 6-year-old when the book starts. Who knows? Or maybe I just adjusted to the writing style and I started picking up the intricacies more. We got a few more interesting, layered female characters in the second half, but I still wanted more. I'm hoping, based on how the book ended, that some of those characters will show up in the next book and get a lot more page time and a lot more development. That would be nice. I think my main critique of this book is just the lack of complex female characters getting any page time whatsoever, and definitely a total failure of the Bechdel test, because I'm not sure we ever see more than one woman talking to each other in this book. Again, it's from Fitz's perspective, but still, where are the women? I don't know, especially because there's so many references to the fact that in this land, royalty don't pass down only through the male line. They do pass down to whoever the eldest child is, including a female child. So there have been queens as well as kings, and also that there are women who are soldiers in this world. Even the queens who are married into the royal family are given much more importance within the society. They are given a role to play. They are also leaders and rulers, if not quite as much as their spouses who were born into the royal line. Women are also allowed to train and learn magic. Yeah, just a lack of women doing things, talking, existing in the world, despite the fact that it's reiterated many times that women have the ability to have these positions of power. So that was a disappointment for me. And just one more thing gender-wise, I realize this was published in the mid-90s, but we have a character who is described to be genderless, or at the very least that no one knows what this character's gender is, that they haven't told anyone and no one can confirm, and it's not clear. They're very androgynous. Yet, despite the fact that Fitz makes the point that he once asked this person what their gender was and they refused to answer, and that they never knew one way or the other, they still only ever refer to this character, or 99% of the time refer to this character with he, him pronouns. And I guess those are the pronouns everyone else is using, so maybe that makes sense, but I just found it weird because they, them pronouns were being used to refer to people whose gender you don't know in the 90s and long before. So it's not like that didn't exist at the time. I just thought it was weird. I did like Fitz as a protagonist. I continued to like him through to the end. He had some interesting character development. He definitely, through to the end, I think he's 15 at the end of this book, he's still a little bit in his bratty teenage phase, so I'm kind of hoping the next book either ages him up right away, or, I mean, maybe not, because I do think we stopped at an interesting point and it would be nice to pick right up from there, but maybe moves a little faster so that he can age up into his young adulthood and maybe be a little bit less of a bratty teenager for everyone's sake, mostly for my sake. I really felt like he had a bit more agency at the end of the book, which was satisfying to read because so much of his story is feeling adrift, like he doesn't belong anywhere, like he isn't anyone, like he doesn't have control over his life and doesn't know what his purpose is and doesn't feel settled. And it felt more so at the end like he had started to perhaps make steps in the direction of figuring out who he is and also figuring out who he can really trust, who has been there for him, who he can rely on, where he belongs and what he brings to the table and maybe what his purpose might be. Although there are complications to that, of course, because it's an ongoing series. I will say this book made me cry maybe 4 times total, and all 4 times it was about a dog. So take that how you will. I finished this book feeling pretty emotional. I finished it feeling like it had really ramped up and I needed to immediately hop into the next book, which I did actually. I actually listened to the last couple chapters in bed last night and I immediately started the next audiobook, like within a couple seconds, because I just thought, well, now I need to know what happens next. So I think that's probably a pretty effective first book of a series. It does have that really slow build and draws you in and makes you want to keep reading, or at least it did for me. But I do feel like I wanted a little bit more detail about the magic system. It seems like maybe based on how the book ended, we will get more in the next book, but I wanted a little bit more in the first book. And I did feel, as much as like I said in the halfway update, there wasn't anything wrong with it. I wasn't not enjoying it. I wasn't struggling to keep going, but I did find it a little bit slow and drawn out. And I would have loved a tiny bit more their development of the characters and relationships around him in the first half, or just a little bit more excitement here and there, a little more stakes before the ending. It just was a little bit, not boring because it wasn't boring, but just slow. But I think I'm coming in at 4 stars for this right now. Definitely very much enjoyed it. Just a couple things that felt like they weren't quite there, and a lot of things that didn't slot into place for me until very much near the end of the book, but still a very enjoyable reading experience. So I'm going to do a short spoiler section. Spoilers starting now for all of Assassin's Apprentice. Okay, so spoilers. Basically, I cried, like I said, 4 times in this book. One of those times was for Smithy, the little puppy that Lady Patience gifted Fitz, who was killed in an attack as he was trying to protect Burrick. That was very sad, and I cried. I think we didn't get as much development for Smithy and for Fitz and Smithy's bond as we did him and Nosy, his other dog, so it didn't hit quite as hard, especially because it was the second time that he lost a puppy that he was bonding to. I was maybe a little desensitized at that point, but still sad, still made me cry. But the 3 other times I cried, all 3 were literally about the same dog Nosy. I actually can't believe that Robin Hobb made me cry over this dog 3 separate times, and 2 of those times she was making me cry over this dog dying. She made me think this dog was killed early on in the book, and I was sobbing about a puppy being murdered and taken away from Fitz, who was a little child at the time, only to later discover that Nosy actually isn't dead, which made me cry when they were reunited. But then Nosy actually does die at the end, and Fitz sees him die, so he knows he's actually dead, and he dies saving Fitz. So then I was sobbing all over again for Nosy dying, and I'd already grieved this imaginary dog. I couldn't believe it. I was like, Robin Hobb, are you kidding me? Not only does the dog die, but the dog dies over and over and over again. How dare you? So anyway, again, take that how you will. The fact that my tears were reserved for the dogs in this book, and mostly, 75% of my tears for Nosy, who didn't even get that much page time, to be totally frank, but Nosy was a good dog. Okay, Nosy deserved all the treats and the snuggles and the belly rubs and the love. Forever. Had me sobbing at the end. I cried basically through the end of the book because Nosy died again. And I did think it was really effective the way she wrote it, because the way the scene plays out the first time, I can't remember if Nosy is mentioned at all or only in passing. I think Nosy isn't mentioned to be in the room at all as the scene is happening. I'll have to reread it to confirm. But then when Fitz is sort of recapping and talking about the aftermath and what happened, he mentions the fact that he has scars from the bite marks of Nosy pulling him out of the tub where he was drowning to save his life, and that Nosy passed away in that final heroic act. And it hit so hard because I thought, well, I don't know what I thought. I thought someone came in and saved him, or he managed to sort of pull himself half out of the tub before he died. I don't know. I was not okay. And then when I reread it this morning so I could annotate, I was crying again. I kind of feel like I have to look up and find out if more dogs are killed in this series, because that was a lot for me. I also was very sad to find out that most of the characters who you think might die at some point don't die. But then the one character who does actually die is the really nice mountain prince, who just seems like a really good dude. And like he would be a really good ruler. And he dies in such a shocking, frustrating way that the way that it's set up, you think that Fitz is revealing to him that he was meant to poison him, and he's showing him and telling him ahead of time and saving his life, and that he will live. And then it turns out that the wine they were drinking was already poisoned, and they've both been poisoned, but that the prince drank more than Fitz, and he dies in front of him. You feel so intensely Fitz's lack of agency in that situation. He has no control over what's happening. He felt like he had a choice in the situation, as difficult as it was, because he was going against the command of his king and also his prince. But he felt like he was making that choice, like maybe he was betraying everything he knew, but that he was doing what he felt was right, only for that choice to be taken away from him and to still feel responsible for the prince's death, even though he was trying to warn him and save his life. And not only does Fitz have that feeling of a lack of control and despair and a lack of agency, but I felt like that as a reader, and it was very upsetting to read, even though we didn't know the prince very well and we'd only had a few chapters with him. Like I said, he seemed like a really nice man. And it was so upsetting for him to die that way, and for Fitz to feel like he was going to be able to save him only to be outwitted. And it makes sense because Fitz is 15. So, he really isn't a mastermind or anything. And it's not like he thinks he's a mastermind. Actually, that's one of the things I really like about Fitz. As much as he's been trained to be an assassin, he really is very vulnerable in his own mind about how unsure he is, and wondering what he should do, and wishing he could talk to his mentors when difficult decisions come up, and really feeling stressed about what kind of poison do I use? How do I do it so that it doesn't immediately land on me? Should I do it at all? Do I feel like I can do it? And all of that feels much more realistic for a 15-year-old who is very early in his career as an assassin, who is still being trained and hasn't had a lot of experience, and is trying to play at the table with all of these fully grown adult rulers who have a lot of years on him, and he's out of his depth. And I feel like the end of this book was very clear about that, how out of his depth he was, and I liked that a lot because it felt a lot more realistic than so many books I've read where the main character is a teenager and yet is much more competent and skilled and confident and able to face any situation than any other person, no matter their age or experience. So I appreciated that, but it was very upsetting, frustrating scene. I am also glad that Burke survived. I did think he was going to die guy for a minute there. And I'm glad that it seems like maybe they are reconciling, especially the way the end of the book went with Burke committing to helping him. But I can't say that I'm not frustrated at him for the number of times that he sort of threw Fitz away, especially the fact that it's revealed that he also has the wit. He has the ability to feel animals in his mind and talk to them telepathically, but he's acting like Fitz is a monster or dirty or sinful or whatever for engaging in the wit when he is capable of it. And also it's implied that he occasionally uses it. So he's a hypocrite and also a shitty father figure. And honestly, I spent most of the book pretty pissed at him, while in the ending, he did a lot to help Fitz, and they had some sweet moments, and it felt like their relationship was turning around. I was still pissed at him, because what the heck, truly. And the fact that he's upset that Fitz, sorry, but I'm still thinking about Nosy, okay? The fact that he's upset that Fitz would think he would kill Nosy when he obviously, very clearly made it seem like that's what he was doing. I guess he just knocked Nosy out or something to cut off their connection. But then he didn't tell Fitz anything about what he was doing with Nosy and took him away to another kingdom. How would Fitz know when he was, he was like 7, 8, 9 at the time? He was a little kid, and he thought that Burke killed the dog, and then Burke's so offended that he would ever think that he would kill a puppy for something that Fitz did. How dare you think that of me? And it's like, serious? Really? What? Really? You didn't think he would assume that? Okay. How are you still the victim in this situation, the harmed party? Anyway, I like Burke. I think he's an interesting character, but I'm mad at him. He needs to do a lot to redeem himself for me, okay? I'm not sure I really buy, not that I don't buy it. I'm not that invested in the Fitz-Mary romance. Maybe it's over now because of the way it ended in this book. It seems like Mary might have gone off to marry someone else. Mary. Anyway, it doesn't seem like Fitz is that torn up about it. He also seems like he's into his uncle's new wife, which could cause some issues. They are closer in age, so I wonder if that's going to be a thing in the next book, which would really suck because I feel like his uncle, Verity, is one of the few people who have been on his side and tried to protect him and been very kind to him and welcoming and given him a place. And if he fucks that up by fucking his wife, we're going to have issues. So I kind of hope that doesn't happen, even though they seem like they have a lot in common and would potentially be a good couple. Who knows? Who knows? Do I have anything else to say that is spoilery? Regal is the worst, but that was pretty obvious from the beginning. He continued to be the worst. He is now even more so the worst, and I hope he dies at some point in the series. So I'm also glad that the masochistic magic teacher, whatever his name is, I feel like I blocked it out. Galen, starts with a G. Why did I think Gabe? I don't know. Galen, I'm glad Galen's dead. Fuck that guy. That's how I feel about that. What do I hope for the next book? I am hoping that we see Fitz develop his magic, his skill, but also his wit. I hope we figure out what being forged really means. How are they forging people? What is going on with that? Is that a kind of magic that can be manipulated so that these people can be saved? I want more female characters to have more page time and complexity and talk to each other and have more agency and just be more interesting and prominent in the storyline. I want Fitz to have more relationships with women of various kinds. I want him to develop his relationship with Patience more because she's trying to be a motherly figure for him, but he seems to not be willing to let her in. I want to know the Fool's deal. What's up with the Fool? The Fool is such an interesting character. I loved them, and I loved the little snippet we got. The description of their room made me so intrigued, even more so than I already was by just their entire vibe. All the weird prophecies that they share and just how aloof and kind of alien they feel. Alien in the sense of the word of being very different in their mannerisms and their appearance from everyone else around them, and they just sort of seem like they're existing on a different plane than everyone else. They're in a different dimension, just overlapping, and I want to know more. I feel like, maybe I'm making this up, but I feel like there is a later book in this world that has Fool in the title, and I'm hoping that means that some later book or series focuses on the Fool. That would be fantastic. I want both Burke and Chade to be Fitz's platonic dads. I don't think Burke even knows Chade exists, so it's not like they would be a couple, but I want them to both be Fitz's dads and stop abandoning him or giving him the silent treatment at regular intervals. Just be his dads, okay? Stop resisting, be his dads. And Verity to continue to be his warm, friendly, loving uncle, as he already has been. Keep up the good work, Verity. Proud of you. You're a good man. Yeah, I want him to let Lady P. Lady P. All my notes are initials, so I just have B and C to be his dads, and V to be his uncle, and Lady P to be his mom. I just want him to fully develop his family and accept them all, and for them to love up on him so that he can heal some of his childhood wounds, or, you know, at least grow around them and just have the love and support that he deserves. So I think that's it for spoilers. And like I said, I think I'm landing at 4 stars for this right now. Really enjoyed it, excited to keep reading. I'm invested. It just felt like it was a bit of a slow build to get us there, and there were some areas that felt a little less developed than I wanted them to be. I could definitely see a future where finishing the entire trilogy makes me feel a little differently and want to give this 5 stars, so who knows, future me might change my rating, but for now, 4 stars for Assassin's Apprentice. I really liked this. Thanks to everyone who's recommended it, and of course, like I said, I already started on book 2, Royal Assassin. I'm not very far into it, but I have started it. One thing I will say, I'm not going to really talk about it yet. I'll go off and read to the halfway point as per usual, but I find it really funny that this book starts with a pretty detailed recap of book 1, especially because it came out only a year after Assassin's Apprentice. It'd be one thing if this came out 10 years later and the author's like, people might not be rereading book 1. Let's give them a recap. This came out a year later. So even people who read this on publication day and then waited a while to pick this one up probably would still remember at least the, you know, the big players and the major events, but maybe not. I just found it funny how detailed and extended the summary / recap was, and it just kept going. And I also found it interesting that he was saying that the only woman he ever had a real relationship with and that he felt he cared about or they cared about him was Mary. And I just kept feeling like, what? Lady P is right there? What do you mean, only Mary? The only other thing I will say about this before I go off and keep reading is that so far it feels like chronic illness or disability and internalized ableism is going to be a pretty heavy theme of this book, and I'm just a little worried about how it's going to be handled, and I am curious to know how disabled or chronically ill readers feel about how it's handled in this book, but I'm hopeful that it will be handled well, especially because I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about that in the context of this series, so I'm hoping that either it isn't as prominent as it feels like it's going to be, or that it's handled very well, and that's part of why people haven't brought it up before. So anyway, I'm going to go keep reading this. I'll be back when I get to the halfway point to let you know my thoughts. And yeah. I'm back. I'm halfway through Royal Assassin. I don't think I actually looked at the page count on this one before I started, but it's definitely quite a bit longer than book 1. This one comes in at just under 650 pages. So it took me a little bit longer to get halfway through. Then out of curiosity, I looked at the last one because I just wondered how long it was going to take me to get through these 3 books. The last one is 850 pages. So they just keep getting bigger and bigger. Book 1 was under 400 pages for context, so things are escalating. But thoughts on book 2. Once we get out of the detailed recap of book 1 that I mentioned when I first started the book, we really get into the plotline of book 2. And so far, I would say book 2 is faster paced. There is more plot. Technically, it's going slower because we're not actually going through time as quickly, but it feels faster. More things are happening, and there are more exciting things happening. There's less very slow development of the world and the characters. Of course, we spend a lot of time in Fitz's head, and we get to know a lot about Fitz, but there's just a lot more happening externally, and he's more aware of all of the machinations of court and all the different players on the board and their many motivations. I will say, like I mentioned, I think about book 1, one of the things I like about Fitz is that he is not the all-powerful, super genius, amazing at everything sort of character. I keep thinking about Vis from The Will of the Many and The Strength of the Few. Fitz is like the opposite of this. So if you know that series and you also are annoyed by the Gary Stu, Mary Sue style characters who are, the chosen one, extremely powerful, good at everything they try, that is not Fitz. It's possible that he will be the chosen one in one way or another, and he does have some skills. It's not like he's totally useless, but he does make so many mistakes, and to the point where it starts to get annoying because you would think he would be better at a variety of things at this point, not because he's the protagonist and protagonists usually magically are good at things, but because he's been training in a bunch of these areas, especially as an assassin, from a very young age, and yet he has zero awareness. He'll drink any cup of tea that just appears in his room while he's asleep. He'll eat anything prepared by anyone with no concern. And he gets poisoned so many times. It's actually ridiculous how often he's poisoned by people without even realizing or considering that that could be the case. Wild to me, but alas, it's almost starting to get so extreme that it's going in the opposite direction, where it's starting to annoy me that he's so incompetent. But again, he is still, I actually don't know if we know exactly how old he is, maybe 16, 17, something like that. So he's still pretty young, but I mean, come on. I know that I was saying that I was hoping we would speed through this development a bit more so we could skip over some of the bratty teenage phase. We haven't done that. Like I said, we are moving more slowly through actual time, even though the pacing of the story and the various events seem to be faster. So he is maybe a year older, if that. He's still a bit of a bratty teenager. He is coming into his own a little bit more. I feel like there are moments and inklings of more of an adult perspective on the world and on again, the sort of his awareness of the political machinations of court and what it means to be a leader, to be a king or a queen, to be loyal to your people, to have this kind of all-encompassing duty that you are responsible for, and not only to be willing to die for your king or queen and your country, but to be willing to give your life and to continue to live perhaps a miserable life for your king, queen, and country. So there are more inklings of him being more adult, not just in the realms of his profession, I guess, and politically, but also interpersonally. I would say his relationships, platonic and romantic, he is coming at them generally with more of an adult mindset, but he's still a teenager and he still has his little tantrums and can be very dumb. He's pretty impulsive and just kind of says whatever comes to mind, and he puts his foot in it a lot. I like Fitz as a character. I like following him. I think he's interesting. I find him pretty endearing, and I can relate to him in several ways, but I do also find him irritating, and his incompetence is sometimes pissing me off, but probably more realistic than the alternative. In terms of relating to Fitz, he does have this sort of lone wolf, socially awkward kind of vibe to him, even when he is with people who have told him repeatedly that they like him and want to spend time with him. He has this constant feeling that he doesn't belong, or that they don't really want him to be there, or he's not living up to their expectations. This social anxiety inner monologue that I can relate to at various points in my life. That little voice has been louder or quieter. But also, as someone who is neurodivergent, I have ADHD and I was undiagnosed until my 30s. I spent a lot of my life not understanding why I didn't feel like I fit in with other people, why I felt like I wanted a different level of connection and friendship from people than they wanted. In reverse, why I always felt a little out of step, like I was out of phase with everyone around me. And now that I've been diagnosed, I believe that some of this has to do with my brain just being different from neurotypical brains. And I kind of get that feeling from Fitz. I can really relate to that. And one aspect that it really shows for him is how he finds it so much easier to be around animals than people. And he connects to them on so much of a deeper level. And he just feels seen and accepted by animals in a way that he hasn't really ever felt from another human being. And I can relate to that. This pervasive feeling he has that he is alone and he doesn't belong. And as much as sometimes it frustrates me because there'll be a scene where he, like I said, he's with someone who does actually care about him and want to be closer to him, and he pushes them away. He is part of that dynamic, but he's not aware of it enough to stop it. And even at some moments, I feel like he gets close to realizing, to having that self-awareness, but he's not quite there yet. And again, relatable, because there have been times where I can feel myself pushing someone away when all I want is to have a closer, deeper relationship with them. And I just can't stop myself from doing it. I think it's maybe a trauma response or an anxiety thing. Anyway, this is not a therapy session. I just relate to Fitz a lot. And sometimes that makes it hard to read because he frustrates me and I can see myself in him and see, my own flaws in him. But I also am rooting for him and want him to figure it out and to find that belonging and that sense of peace and security in his life. And I think he can do it. So I'm hoping for that for him. I feel like we're getting more development of the secondary characters in this book than we did in the first book. Definitely more development of a couple key female characters, which has been nice. I feel like they are more prominent in the story than they were in the first book, and I'm liking that. Also, like I had mentioned, I was a bit worried about how disability and or chronic illness was going to be handled and internalized ableism. That has been basically absent from the rest of the book. It was very prominent in the first couple chapters, but there's been very little mention of that, very little inclusion of that moving forward. So it seems to me, it was more of a temporary, the character who was thinking that they were going to be permanently chronically ill and or disabled seems to have mostly recovered from their illness. So it's not really that they developed a more self-compassionate, thoughtful perspective on their situation. They just kind of got better. So I kind of wish they had been given a little bit more time to work through those feelings rather than the problem just being taken away. But it is what it is. I had a couple theories within the first quarter or so of this book that I felt were pretty much confirmed by the halfway point. Maybe not totally explicitly confirmed, but very heavily implied. I was going to share all my theories in a spoiler section, but I'm not sure it's worth sharing them now that I'm pretty sure that they've been confirmed. I guess I'll tell you what they were in case you're curious, but the Fool is definitely still the most intriguing character to me, and we're starting to learn a little bit more about their background and possible abilities, which is cool, so I hope we get more of that. The conflict with the Red Ship Raiders and the Forged Ones is escalating. So there's a bit more excitement. We have more stakes. There are more battles both on land and at sea. So there's that. And we are learning a little bit more how the various types of magic in this world work. And Fitz is continuing to develop his skills, though still relatively slowly. But I am enjoying seeing more of how it works and learning more of the boundaries and sort of rules of how it works and it doesn't work. It's definitely being conveyed to us in a more piecemeal, moment by moment, as it's required for the plot or as Fitz learns things sort of way, rather than being explained to us in a more explicit manner in the way that I think more modern fantasy, maybe because it's become common to ask about magic systems or for people to have interest in different types of magic systems. I feel like fantasy writers are more explicit about the rules and how the magic works and the boundaries, etc. It's often told to us more explicitly in maybe more of an info dumpy kind of way, either through characters or through a narrator. And in this book, it's definitely more organic, the way information around the magic system is being disseminated, which I don't dislike. I just like magic. So I would like more, you know? Is there anything more I can say without spoilers? I don't think so. The writing style continues to be nice. Like I said, pretty straightforward, but elevated and has some really lovely moments here and there that are more lyrical. I think Robin Hobb's prose shines the most with The Fool, just because The Fool often speaks in more circuitous, poetic riddles. And I feel like the way The Fool's dialogue is constructed is very clever. So I appreciate that. I enjoy those moments. Definitely still a lot of commentary on leadership and sacrifice as a leader and finding that balance of how much you sacrifice for your people and how to be a good leader and how to instill confidence in people and rally them while not maybe lying to them or misleading them or giving them unearned confidence and setting them up for failure. How do you charm them and motivate them and make them feel safe and secure while also being honest with them about the situation and trying to keep them on their toes and on guard so they can protect themselves? Where is that line of sacrificing yourself for your people if you give so much of yourself that you can't go on and leave your people without a leader? Is that actually a selfless act, or are you harming them more by giving so much of yourself and not being able to give any more than if you had been a little bit more circumspect in how much you give over a period of time and delegate more and act with a bit more prudence? I just think the way that this series so far is analyzing different leadership styles and different perspectives on being a leader in different lands and how these various characters handle that heavy weight of responsibility is really fascinating, and I hope that continues. I imagine it will. It seems like it's a pretty prominent theme, along with the loneliness and belonging sort of theme that we get with Fitz, and also some commentary on power. We've learned a little bit more about the Forged, though we still have no idea how it works, but we are encountering them more and it's developing in honestly a direction I didn't quite expect. I guess I'll mention that in the spoiler section, but yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's good. I like it. I want to go finish it. So I'm going to do that. But first, just a few spoilers. So the Forged are slowly morphing into zombies. Either they were always zombies and I didn't realize it, or things are escalating in a bad direction, because they are now not just attacking people so that they can steal their food and their stuff and kill them because they just have this bloodlust. They are attacking people so they can eat them. So cannibalism has been introduced. Feels like they're becoming zombies, essentially. And we learn this because Fitz is trying to stop a group of Forged from cannibalizing a very young child. Seems like they might be a toddler. And while he's able to stop them, the child has already died from their rough handling. So that was pretty intense and hard to read. I'm a bit surprised. I didn't expect the zombie direction. I guess it does sort of tie into some of the things that we learned about them in the first book, about them seeming like they were no longer there, that it was their bodies, but their minds or hearts or souls were gone, that they seemed sort of mindless and were extremely violent and driven and seemed to only have rage and anger left, but still surprised by that development, I would say. And then my theories from the first quarter of the book or so that were pretty much very heavily implied to be right by the halfway point were, one, to do with the Fool. My theory was that the Fool was somehow tied to the Elderlings, the sort of older, almost godlike race of beings, creatures that they revere and talk about in their myths, and they don't really remember much about them, but they know that they were these powerful beings. It seems from the little backstory the Fool told Fitz that there was sort of a mixing between heavily implied to be the Elderlings and the people that the Fool comes from. Those touched by this ancient, long-lived race are very clearly marked, and those children are assigned or given the destiny to continue on the work of this ancient race of beings, and that part of their work is to read the future by taking sort of aggregate data of the entirety of human history and the study of it to be able to see sort of the web of all the possible options and to be able to sort of like a tapestry and to be able to selectively choose threads and move them or unweave parts of the tapestry. And that the reason the Fool came to this court was because of Fitz, because Fitz is a possibility and allows the Fool to more easily manipulate the future, possibly, or just gives options somehow. And this is something the Fool implied or talked about a little bit in the first book, but definitely expands upon here. So I feel like even though the Fool didn't say it's the Elderlings, that's my feeling, because we haven't really heard about any other ancient beings. They could be introduced later, but I think it makes more sense for it to be the one ancient race of people-like beings that we've heard about. And my other theory was, as we kept seeing the king get sicker and sicker, and the fact that the king's original valet had passed, and he now had this new nurse/valet, Wallace, who didn't seem to be a very competent or kind person, I started to wonder if Wallace had been hired by someone, probably Regal, to take care of the king, be close to him under the guise of helping him to be better, but to actually keep him sick. And as we have continued through the book, I feel like there are more and more signs, and now it's basically just been 100% confirmed that Wallace is keeping the king in squalor and keeping him hot and sweating all the time, no fresh air, using some of the smokes that Regal got into using when they were with the mountain people that are heavily implied to be drugs for pleasure, but also potentially drugs that keep you sort of in a stupor, and also heavily implied that these kinds of drugs are ones that Regal's mother and the king's late wife used excessively before her death. So he seems to be being kept underfed, drugged through the smoke and the air, also drunk on a lot of wine, potentially with various herbs mixed in, poisonous or depressants, things to keep him sleeping and struggling to think clearly, etc., etc., etc. It does seem like the more we learn about this situation, the more that Wallace is not actually trying to help him, and also that Regal is very involved. So again, that was something I started wondering from the beginning, and again has mostly it's been heavily implied, maybe not 100% confirmed, but we basically know that now. And the one thing I don't have a theory on yet is the Forged and how that works. There was one sort of world building chapter intro that talked about how that the Red Sail Raiders never allow themselves to be taken alive, and that was a hint about how the Forged were created, but they didn't notice it at the time. And I've been thinking about that, and I don't know how that I don't know what that has to do with anything. They don't allow themselves to be taken alive. Presumably that means they would rather kill themselves than be taken prisoner. So if the Forged are actually zombies made from dead people, I don't know. I guess I'm not smart enough to put together the pieces. I'm not noticing all the hints, or there aren't that many yet. I don't know, but I don't have a theory. I don't know how they're being made. Maybe the white ship that Fitz saw that no one else seemed to see is somehow controlling it. Does that have to do with the Elderlings? I don't know. But I don't know how the Forged work, and I want to find out the answer. So, I don't think I have anything else. He and Molly have started sleeping together and admitted their love for each other, but the king doesn't want to let him marry Molly, so I'm not sure how that's going to end. It feels like they're not going to get a happy ending, which is unfortunate. I do like Molly well enough. I'm glad she's getting more page time, but I can't say that I find their relationship all that interesting to read about. Like, I'm happy for them and everything, but I just don't really... I don't know. I'm not swept up in the romance of it all. I feel like I'm more interested in Fitz's conversations with his uncle's wife, the princess. I feel like they have more interesting conversations than he does with Molly. Not that I think, once again, that he should end up with her. There aren't that many women in the story, and Fitz seems to be straight, so there's only so many people I can ship him with. Speaking of straight people, and possibly gay people, I have started to have my own fan theory that Burrick was actually in love with Chivalry, and possibly vice versa. There's no reason why Chivalry the First couldn't have been bi. What if he and Burrick were in love, but knew they couldn't get married because he had a responsibility as the king in waiting to get married and bear an heir. So he and Burrick were like, sorry, we can't be together. Like, we'll always love each other, but we'll stay close even if we can't be together. And Burrick gave him that earring as a lover's gift and also a commitment to always be there for him, even if they couldn't be together romantically. anymore, and chivalry, despair over the breakup, slept with Fitz Chivalry's mom and ended up having a bastard, and then found Lady Patience and thought, okay, here's a woman I could love. She's not Burrick, but she's amazing, and I love her too, and this is going to be great, and married Lady Patience and was happy with her because he's bi, but Burrick always loved chivalry and was never able to move on, and is also part of why he has such complex feelings about Lady Patience and why he reacted so intensely when Fitz told him about Lady Patience, saying that it was hard to be married to a man who already had another loyalty and that a horse can't be saddled twice, which, I think was meant to be the way that Fitz read it, was that Fitz was already dedicated to the crown or to his father or to the kingdom, and so he couldn't be wholly dedicated to her. But the way Burrick reacted felt much more personal, like maybe chivalry continued to be in love with Burrick through their entire lives, even if he didn't act on it because he was chivalrous and would never do such a thing. Just a theory, just a little gay theory. I always have little gay theories, can't help myself. As a bisexual, I look for representation anywhere I can, even where it doesn't exist. But let me know if you've read this, if you ever got those vibes. Obviously, Burrick loved chivalry, and it could have been platonic. I'm just saying, it could have also been romantic. I'm getting those vibes, and I would love that. Anyway, I think that's it. Now that I've shared all my theories, both serious and silly, I think I'm done. Anyway, that's it for spoilers. Those are my thoughts on the first half of Royal Assassin, and I'm gonna go finish it now. So I'll be back once I do that. Hey there. It is 2:30 in the morning. I had to stay up to finish because there was no way I was going to fall asleep. I needed to know what was going to happen. So here I am, a little wired on a lot of tea and intensity. Things have definitely ramped up, okay? I'm hooked. Goddamn. There's so little I can say without spoiling this book, but also spoiling the first book for you. I imagine that, as I continue the next book, it's going to be even more so that it's hard to do non-spoiler sections. But just believe me, if you're watching this and you haven't read this yet, it gets a lot more intense. It gets more fast-paced. The stakes are high at this point. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's intense. So coherent. So helpful. This was really great. I feel like my complaints about the first book were mostly to do with a little bit of a lack of development of the secondary characters, and especially female characters, and then just how slow-paced it was for most of the book, and a lack of stakes for most of the book. This book has none of those issues. We got more development of many of the side characters in a way that I really appreciated, including 2 women. Technically, there are a couple other female characters who get more development, but they were more minor players in this book. I would say there are 2 who play a major part throughout the book, and I liked both of them. I liked the development of both of them. They're 2 very different kinds of people, and so we got to see 2 very different examples of womanhood within this world, and I thought both were really interesting. I continued to be interested in Fitz. I think he started to become more competent at a very realistic pace, and while in the first half, there were a few moments where I was thinking, dude, you are not taking this seriously. You have learned very little in your training. Get your shit together. He got his shit together. He figured it out, finally. Again, probably a more realistic timeline, if any of this were realistic. I don't know. But I appreciated that, and I do like Fitz, and I am rooting for him, and I liked the way that his journey developed through this book. Also, the pacing and the stakes were just on a whole other level through this entire book. Like I said, it's wild because I think it's maybe 2 years from age 15 to 17 in this book compared to age 6 to 15 in the first book, but it's so much faster. Even though it's a much longer book, it's twice as long almost as the first book and covers a fraction of the time, but it feels way faster paced. And also just the stakes have exploded. Everything is much more serious. There's a lot happening. Danger everywhere. I thought it was great. It was exciting. It was emotional. I cried a number of times in this book, and I don't think any of those times was for a dog. Not because I suddenly had a lack of empathy for dogs, but I feel like dogs got off a little bit lighter in this book than they did in the first book. There was less sadness to do with dogs, more sadness to do with people, and I cried for them multiple times. Also got a couple satisfying moments of character reveals, characters coming together, characters admitting things to each other, characters reconciling or being vulnerable with each other, and love of all different kinds being expressed. Familial bonds, friendship bonds, romantic relationships, and all the same thematic notes are being played that I mentioned in the halfway update all the way through. Definitely a lot to do with what makes a good leader and different leadership styles and how they can reflect on a populace and how people rally behind different types of leaders at different points in history in different circumstances, and what makes a good leader, what makes someone worthy of the crown, and how to fulfill your duty and your loyalty to your people or to your king and or queen while still following your own heart and following your own moral compass, and how you decide who takes ultimate precedence in your life and who you prioritize when you have difficult decisions to make, I guess. I liked it a lot, if you can't tell. I'm giving this 5 stars. Obviously, I feel like that's obvious. 5 stars for this book. Like I said, any of my qualms with the first book were squashed in this one, and I will say, as much as I had my little critiques of the first book, everything that was developed in the first book made the second book hit even harder, as you might expect with a well-structured, well-written, and built and planned out series. I can only imagine the next book will hit even harder for that reason, as we've grown closer and more attached to all these characters and their bonds. I really don't know where the next book is going to go. I have an idea plot-wise what Robin Hobb might try to wrap up or explore, but I feel like the way this book ended makes it hard to know how any of the things I thought the third book was going to explore are going to happen. So I'm very interested to know, and I will in fact be starting it as soon as I stop recording, even though it's 2:30 in the morning. I might just stay up all night reading. Very much nostalgic, reading fantasy with a flashlight under the covers in 1999 vibes. Love it for me. It's great. I'm having a great time. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can say that's non-spoilery that is also things that I haven't already covered either about the first book or this one so far. I think everything is the same. I continued to be very interested in the magic of this world, in several of the characters. The Fool continues to be my favorite and the most intriguing for me. I feel like there are a lot of answers that we started to get, but still so many left to discover. And considering the fact that this is, the realm of the Elderlings series is, I think, 3 trilogies and a 4-book series smashed together, if I'm not mistaken. So what is that, 13 books? And possibly ongoing. I don't even know if the series is done. I imagine that while we'll get a lot of answers, there will still be many things left open-ended for these other series to explore. So I might have to do a lot more reading over the holidays to finish this entire series. I did have other reading planned, but I might have to clear my schedule. Anyway, honestly, this is selfish. I just want to keep reading. I don't want to be here talking. I want to be reading. Assassin's Quest. I didn't remember what the third book was called. So I'm going to do a quick spoiler section to talk about some of those things for those of you who have read this series. And then I'm going to run off and read until I can't keep my eyes open. So Spoilers now for Royal Assassin and also for Assassin's Apprentice. Of course, starting now, spoilers, spoilers. Use the chapters to skip this if you don't want to be spoiled. First of all, several of my theories were right, although I was kind of not wrong about what was happening to the king, but I didn't get the whole picture. I didn't realize that a couple of the students who were being trained to use the skill along with Fitz in the first book were being used to slowly drain the strength from the king. Every time he used his skill, they were sort of worming their way in and pulling his strength, and they ended up killing him that way in the end when he tried to reach out to his son Verity for the last time, which was devastating. The king's death had me sobbing the hardest that I did through this whole book. There were a few little details and moments that Robin Hobb focused on that reminded me a little too vividly of losing my dad. I was just a mess reading it, and it was devastating to realize how much pain the king had been in for so long and how several people were trying to help him, but there were just too many people that didn't have his best interest at heart that were using him and basically just trying to kill him extremely slowly so it would look like a natural death from a long illness, and it was devastating. I feel like the moments where he was realizing and finally acknowledging to himself that he was wrong about his son Regal and that he in fact would be a horrible king and was trying to kill him and was not the man he thought he was and not the son he thought he was, and how betrayed and devastated he was, broke me a little bit. It was just just awful. It was bad enough everything the king had been through and how small and frail and sad he was at the end, but to have that realization and how much that broke him was devastating. You know, he lost his first son, and then he thought he lost his second son, and then he realized that his third son had never been his, really, and had never truly loved him, and that's just heartbreaking. The theory, I guess we never had it fully confirmed, but the theory that they come up with that Regal always blamed his father for his mother's death, even though it's pretty widely known and acknowledged that Regal's mother, the second queen, was addicted to drugs and essentially caused her own death over a very long period of excessive use of the various drugs that she was using. And Regal was unwilling or unable to acknowledge that his mother was sick, that she had an addiction, and that was the cause of her death, and either outright blamed his father for killing her or just that he didn't do enough to save her, and that he'd been brainwashed by her perspective that Pharaoh, one of the duchies, should have been the true seat of the six duchies and was superior, far superior to any of the coastal duchies, and that she actually had more power when she was the Lady of Pharaoh than she does as queen, and that she wished she was allowed to go back and just rule Pharaoh as its own independent country. And just this constant refrain that Regal grew up with made him believe the same, and he truly doesn't care if he completely rips apart the six duchies, if all the coastal areas are completely destroyed by the Forged and by the raiders. He just wants to go back inland and live life the way his mother wanted to. And it does make me suspicious if he has more to do with the raiders than we know. Either that he is feeding them information to increase their destruction, or if he is the hand behind, the power behind what they're doing somehow. I almost think that's too much of a conspiracy theory because I don't know if Regal is smart or competent enough to be doing it. Maybe he's in league with someone else and someone else is the brains of the operation, but he is willing to work with them because he would rather destroy all the coastal duchies than allow the six duchies to continue to exist the way that his father would want them to, as revenge or in spite of his father. Wild. I truly thought we were going to get what I worried about, I think all the way in book one, which was Fitz falling in love with his aunt by marriage and them sleeping together. Luckily, that still hasn't happened, but we did have a couple moments of Fitz getting it on with his girlfriend while Verity was getting it on with his wife at the same time while they were linked, and him experiencing what Verity is experiencing and really struggling to separate his uncle's feelings for his wife from his own feelings for his aunt. So that was a little stressful. Also, I knew, okay, I realize it. You don't have to tell me that my theory that Burrick is gay and was in love with Chivalry and Chivalry was bi and was also in love with him was a pipe dream, okay? I realized it was not super realistic, especially considering that this book came out in 1996. But I still was clinging to that ship. But I was wrong. Turns out Burrick and Patience were in love first, and then Burrick broke up with her and she married Chivalry instead. And all those quotes that I thought had to do with him and Chivalry actually had to do with him and Patience. And I guess that adds to his complicated feelings around Chivalry because he had committed himself to serve him, but then he was in love with Chivalry's wife. I just, like, fine. It just doesn't land the same. Oh well, it's fine. I'll get over it. I do really like Lady Patience, so fine. I did think it was kind of cute when Burrick was injured and Lady Patience was helping, and the way they were bickering and just the long years of history between them on full display, and Fitz just being so overwhelmed and confused and uncomfortable by their dynamic. I thought that was quite funny. They could be his parents along with Shade. And one of the other moments that made me cry the hardest was Burrick and Shade trying to save Fitz at the end when he'd let go of his body and fully surrendered himself to the wit and been living as a wolf, trying to bring him back to his body, the way that Burrick was holding him and sobbing. And what did he say? Oh God, if I read it, it's going to make me cry again. And every time I closed my eyes, Burrick would seize me and shake me like a rag. Stay with me, Fitz, he kept saying. Stay with me, stay with me. Come on, boy, you're not dead, you're not dead. Then suddenly he hugged me to him, his bearded face bristling against mine and his hot tears falling on my face. He rocked me back and forth, sitting in the snow at the edge of my grave. You're not dead, son, you're not dead. His dads, they love him so much and they want him back. And that made me cry a lot. I feel like he finally started to be more careful and realized that people were trying to kill him actively, or maybe might be trying to listen in or follow him, and yet he still wasn't as careful as he could have been. I don't quite fully accept this idea that Rosemary, the sweet little girl who was a servant to, or a maid to the Queen, was actually betraying her to Regal. I'm really hoping that she didn't even realize what she was doing fully, that she was being sort of double-crossed, or she was being played by Regal somehow, or by someone else working for Regal, and that she didn't know that she was actually betraying her queen. Because I thought Rosemary was so sweet, especially the moments where she was learning to be more proper and really proud of herself for saying the right things. And she just seemed very attached to the Queen. And it's extra devastating because the Queen had so few people to trust and rely on, and the idea that this sweet little girl who was with her all the time was actually sharing her secrets to Regal is devastating. And I just hope that that's not true. I hope that it was just the way that Fitz interpreted what Regal was saying, or that Regal was trying to taunt him just like he did about the fact that he implied that the Queen never got away and that she was dead. Obviously, I'm still working on the assumption that the Queen and the Fool are going to make it all the way to the Mountain Kingdom and be fine and hopefully be reunited with Verity. And then the three of them will come back and take back the Six Duchies from evil Regal, and he'll be killed or humiliated somehow. But ideally killed slowly and painfully because he deserves it. And everyone will be happy, though I'm not sure how likely that is, but that's what I would like to happen. Also, it's so annoying. Like, I get it, Fitz is maybe 17, so he's not the smartest tool in the shed yet. He's a teenager. But the fact that Molly was pretty obviously telling him that she was pregnant and that's why she's leaving, because she had to prioritize their child and she had to put her love for their child ahead of anything she might want. And Fitz is like, when I get out of this, if I somehow survive, I'm going to find out who stole her heart and I'm going to steal her back, because who could she love instead of me? And I'm like, you dolt. She is pregnant. How dumb do you have to be? Like, come on. Sure, she could have told him, but obviously she was trying to, have a clean break situation to protect their child as she was starting to figure out how messy things were with Fitz and how intertwined he was with all of this court intrigue. But come on, he could have figured it out. And Burrick clearly 100% knew and also never told him, which, like, come on, Burrick. Come on, you need to communicate more. I realize he's the strong and silent type, but he's a little too silent. Really loved Kettrikin's development in this book. I loved her and Verity finally fully falling in love with each other and connecting in that way. I loved Kettrikin stepping up and trying to be the queen in waiting and trying to fight for her people and inspire them and fight back with her own hands and, lead them into battle and protect her people and work her diplomacy and make those connections. I just thought the way she grew and blossomed through this book was really gorgeous to watch, and also the way that so many other characters grew to really respect and appreciate her talents and her natural ability to lead and to inspire people. I thought that was really amazing. And I loved how Verity went from being not dismissive of her, but lacking appreciation for her, or lacking even the ability to take the time to stop and look and really see her for who she was, to being a little bit insecure by how great of a leader she was naturally and by some of the choices she was making and the way that she was able to rally people, to that final shift to being kind of in awe of her and really respecting her and really appreciating her and revering her. And that was pretty awesome to see. So thumbs up for Kettrikin. I hope we get more of her in the next book. And I hope she and the Fool become, I don't know, a fun traveling duo and see them develop an even deeper bond. That would be awesome. But I think that's all I want to say for spoilers, and I think I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to go start, I already forgot the next one, Assassin's Quest. I guess maybe they're going to go on a quest, hence the title. What kind of quest? I don't know. Is it going to be a continuation of the quest that was started in this book? Or is it going to be a new quest? Or both? I don't know. But I'm happy to find out. I'm going to go find out right now. Hey, it's me. Once again, very late at night and or early in the morning. I was planning on coming back for an update halfway through this book, as I typically do, but honestly, couldn't put it down, couldn't stop, had to keep going through all, 850 plus pages. I started the audiobook last night, like I said I would, listened until I passed out. The few times I woke up throughout the night, I went back to where I remembered and kept listening. When I woke up this morning, I quickly recapped so I could annotate the first few chapters I got through. And then I just spent the entire day and night reading this behemoth. This is why I love paperbacks. Couldn't stop, couldn't put it down. I will say, I do have some critiques of this. Most of them are probably spoilery, but there might be a few that I can mention without spoiling this book or the previous two. And it's definitely a little bit unevenly paced. I'll say it doesn't feel as slowly paced as the first book. It definitely had higher stakes. It had a lot of exciting, intense moments and just a lot more plot in general, even though it is significantly longer. But definitely has slower moments and slower sections. And then the ending is quite rapidly tied up. Not the most evenly paced book of all time, but it honestly didn't really bother me. I'll say it dragged a little bit in maybe the second quarter of the book, but basically the entire second half of the book, I just was totally wrapped, could not look away, could do basically nothing else. Ears glued to the audiobooks while my eyes were glued to the page. And some of my critiques of the first book that got a little better in the second book continue to get better here. I'll say the prose keeps getting better, at least for my own taste. Still relatively straightforward, yet elevated for the most part, but even more moments that were just really beautifully put, you know, in their simplicity, but resonated with me deeply, felt very emotionally vulnerable and honest and sort of cutting to the quick. And the descriptive language just keeps getting better. I will say that I noticed a pretty big jump in the descriptive language from book 1 to book 2. It was a lot easier for me to envision the places and people and things that were happening. But in this book, just a huge jump again. I had so many moments reading this today where I was full on 4K movie in my head where I basically forgot I was reading and it was just watching a movie. And I know for some people that's basically their entire experience of reading, but that doesn't always happen to me. I tend to picture what's happening on some level, but I'm normally not watching everything in high definition. It's usually sort of sketched out, and if I really pause to think about it, I can fill it out and add color and make it more vivid. But as I'm reading, I'm just sort of having flashes of images and building up the set pieces and thinking about the clothing and envisioning what that would look like, but it's not all playing out frame by frame. There were 3 or 4 scenes, maybe even more in this book, that were full on frame by frame 4K vivid image in my head where I would have moments that I just totally sort of lost my grip on my own reality because I was so immersed in this. And that was fantastic. I love that feeling. I feel like that's a feeling I used to get way more when I was a kid that I don't get as much as an adult, maybe in part because I don't spend an entire day just totally immersed in a book. I'm usually reading in shorter spurts, so maybe that's the trick, but I just felt like the descriptive language was so much more thorough, and that allowed this experience to happen. And I am very grateful because it was awesome. I continued to appreciate following Fitz as a character. I do think his character development stalled a little bit in this book. That's definitely one of my critiques. I feel like he had a lot more growth and development in the second book, and in this book he was a bit stagnant. And to be fair, there was a lot going on. You know, a lot of events were happening around him. He had a lot to do, and there wasn't necessarily a lot of opportunity for self-reflection and growth. I mean, he did have a few moments, but this was less of a character development piece, definitely more of a bringing all the plot pieces together and resolving a lot of things and making things happen sort of book. We get to know a little bit more of Fitz as an adult because this entire trilogy is told from him in the future. It seems at least 10 years or so in the future. So he is now a man in his late 20s at least, reflecting on this time of his life, but we don't get to know this grown version of him nearly as well as the young version of him. So it's not as evident as it could be the ways that he has grown and learned and changed. And we can certainly infer some things based on the life he's chosen for himself and some of the things he says and his reflections on how his life turned out and how other characters and events played out. It would have been interesting to get a little bit more of him as an adult, maybe a chapter or two flashed forward with him would have been nice, or maybe getting to see some of the time in between where the main narrative ends and our little flash forward at the ending would have been nice to kind of bridge the gap. I don't know. I just felt like there was a little something missing for Fitz kind of becoming a fully realized adult for me. But I did like him as a protagonist. There was one event, one character pairing that threw me off so much that I did Google it and read a single Reddit thread just to see what other people were saying. But generally, I have no idea. Do people like Fitz? Do people hate Fitz? Do people think he's annoying? I don't know. I think he was annoying at times. He was a bratty teenager at times. He made stupid decisions at times. But I also felt like I could relate to a lot of the things about him, like I mentioned in past updates, of being better at hanging out with animals than people, struggling to feel like he belongs, dealing with this really deep-seated loneliness, and being a bit impulsive and passionate and rash at times. And I just kind of think that his reaction to a lot of the situations he's put in is much more realistic than pretty much any other teenage protagonist I've ever read about in these world-ending, earth-shattering, terrifying, lose-lose situations that they're constantly put in. I feel like he approaches them in a much more realistic way. And I appreciate that, even if it means that he's not always the perfect hero making every right decision and being magnanimous about all of the sacrifices he has to make constantly. And I think he is pretty courageous and he is a hero in ways, and he is actually pretty magnanimous about quite a few things that happen to him, but he also gets jealous and he feels slighted and he feels hurt and he feels like his life is not his own, and he gets angry about his circumstances. And I think all of that is very realistic. I think I have like a, maybe not maternal, but like fun aunt energy for Fitz, and not fun aunt energy as in Ketrican fun aunt energy with him in particular, not that kind of a dynamic. The one thing that annoys me about him is not even a him issue. It's a Robin Hobb deciding to portray female characters like this over and over again issue. This is not to say that every female character is poorly portrayed, because that's not true. There are lots of awesome female characters in this series, and from the second book and then the third book, we get more and more of them, and I really enjoy them and appreciate them. But we do get, I kid you not, 3 separate women in this book who, upon meeting Fitz, are immediately interested in him. They vary in how quickly they reveal to him that they would like to sleep with him, but they all are drawn to him irrevocably, and they all try to seduce him or offer themselves to him, and he turns them all down because he already has a love, and all 3 of them take it very badly and get upset and jealous and vindictive about it. And why? It would annoy me enough if it happened once. It did annoy me the first time it happened. But then it happened again, and I was like, really? Twice? Really? I guess it's not that much, but it is kind of weird it happened twice. And then it happened for a third time, and the third one was so drawn out for so long, and there was so much sulking and just unnecessary tension and jealousy and jabs and multiple characters trying to address the fact that this small group of people who were on a pretty important mission were not gelling very well because one of the characters could not let go of her jealousy of Fitz not being in love with her. And it was like, why? Why? Why does this keep happening? No. I don't know why we needed that. I don't know what this added. This didn't add anything. The third one kind of sort of added something because it pushed a relationship development milestone between Fitz and another character who had been around since the first book, and I really appreciated that. Him being forced to admit his love for this other character, in this case a platonic love, but a very deep, enduring love. And it was a really sweet and funny and endearing and lovely scene, and I'm glad it happened, but it probably could have come about in so many other ways than the third time's a charm woman wanting to get dicked down by the bastard and being pissed off when he says, "It's not you, it's me. I'm actually already in love with someone else. Peace." It's annoying. why. Also, Fitz definitely gets more aware and thoughtful about how people can harm him based on what he knows and how he knows to harm people, but he still is pretty ignorant, naive about a variety of situations, and there's so many times that it takes him a while to catch up and realize what happened, and I was reading and just yelling at him, no, don't tell that person that thing. No, don't do that. Don't go there. Stop. Wrong choice. Back up. But again, he is a teenager by himself for a lot of this book. Very angry and alone and traumatized and didn't get very good training, at least when it comes to his magic powers, and is up against the system and is floundering. And I think that's a lot more realistic than pretty much, again, every other teenage chosen one saving the world that I've read in fantasy or sci-fi. Maybe not every single one, but most of them. And I think you know what I mean. I also think it's a little ironic. Maybe it's meant to be character development, but there is a moment early on when he meets someone who also has the same kind of magic, one of the two types of magic that he can use, who he has not been able to learn about from someone else in his life. He meets this person and the person's like, hey, stay with me for a while. Let me teach you everything you should have been taught from your parents or some other mentor that you weren't taught so that you can handle this better and be more prepared and protect yourself, and on and on and on. And he's like, yeah, that sounds great and all, but no, I'm going to leave immediately. No time for knowledge. None of this could possibly be useful at any point in the future. Thanks, but no thanks. And then at the end of the book, there's a character who knows a lot about his other kind of magic. And he goes on a little bit of a, honestly, very well written and a little bit of an epic monologue or rant, but also, again, feels very ironic about them purposefully keeping him in ignorance, but then being upset at his ignorance, telling him that he doesn't know enough and he's stupid, and on and on and on. And he keeps making all these mistakes, but refuses to actually tell him things ahead of time and teach him and share their knowledge. And I'm just thinking, my dude, you had the chance to learn everything you could have ever wanted to know about this other kind of magic, and you were just like, yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks. Gonna leave. Bye. Who needs this? And now you're getting mad that someone won't share knowledge with you. It just, again, maybe I should just choose to accept that as character growth because it was very annoying. The Fool continues to be the most interesting character in the series, stole the show every time they are on the page, loved everything about them in this book, loved everything about their relationship with Fitz in this book, pack for life, them along with Night Eyes, who also, I mean, I liked Night Eyes in the last book, but in this book, I feel like Night Eyes really started to shine in a new way. And I wonder if that was as a result of their bond and Night Eyes being able to express himself more clearly, be a little bit more eloquent, since all we get out of him, obviously, is verbal through dialogue. It was nice to get that extra development. And I loved that the Fool and Night Eyes were able to develop their own relationship together. Fantastic. The ending was definitely a bit rushed. Pacing wise, just literally a lot happens in a very few number of pages compared to the rest of the book. Although a lot happens in the rest of the book too. But again, just comparatively, the ending is quite quick. But I did find it pretty satisfying. There are moments there are two main things, maybe three, that I kind of wanted them to end a different way. I'm not sure I'm happy with how they ended necessarily, but I do think it makes sense. And I do think it's pretty satisfying, even if it's not all exactly how I would have personally wanted it to end for every single character and every single, thread being tied up. I think I'm going to wrap up my non-spoiler review mostly here because I don't want to risk spoiling anything for this book or the rest of the series. I'll just say, as much as I had my, critiques of this, I still thought it was fantastic. I think maybe if not for the Fool and the Fool and Fitz and their dynamic, this would be a 4-star read for me, but because of the Fool, I just love them so much. It's going to be a 5-star read. I thought it was great. I have my qualms, I have my critiques, but I really liked it. I had a lot of fun reading it. I had a good time. I thought it was satisfying. I cried a few times. My heart was warmed many, many times. Really enjoyed this series, would highly recommend, and I'm very excited to continue on in the larger series, although I have to double check which series within the series I have to go to next, and also probably have to force myself to pause for a while because I have other things that I want to read. But maybe it'll be a treat once I read down my planned out TBR that I can start the next series within the realm of Elderling series. So, okay, it's now 4:30 in the morning, so I'm going to do a spoiler section and then I'm going to wrap this up because I'm not quite sure how I'm still upright and alert and communicating with you right now. So spoilers for Assassin's Quest and also this entire trilogy. Don't watch these spoilers if you're going to read it and you haven't yet. Why would you do that to yourself? Stop stealing your future joy. Use the chapters to skip it. Okay, spoilers. So there's so many things. I mean, so much happens in this book. I could go beat by beat and talk about every big thing that happens, but I'm not going to do that because that would take ages. But what I am going to do is talk about the ending a little bit. Mostly the reveal that Burrich, I realized that I'm pretty sure in the last review I was calling him Burrick. For some reason that makes more sense to me, but I think it is actually supposed to be Burrich. But anyway, Burrich, who knew that Fitz was alive because he helped bring him back from the dead with Shade, he decided to go off and take care of Molly because he knew Molly was pregnant with Fitz's child, which he didn't tell Fitz, mostly because presumably Molly told him not to. Still feels like he maybe should have, but that's just me. So he goes to take care of Molly, and I guess at some point he changes his mind, thinks he might go back and tell Fitz that he is actually going to be or is a dad. I can't remember if she'd given birth when he went back, and discovers what he thinks is Fitz's dead body, which is actually a forged man who had put on his shirt with his pin from King Shrewd on it, who Fitz ran into when he came back to his hut and killed and left dead in front of the hut, and presumably has been there long enough, decomposed enough, that Burrich didn't realize that it wasn't Fitz, and he was wearing his shirt and had the pin, so he thinks Fitz is actually dead, and he doesn't learn that that's not the case. To the very end of this book, he does not know that Fitz is still alive. So he goes back to take care of Molly, thinking Fitz is dead. Molly thought that Fitz died the first time at the end of the last book. She just continues to think that. He decides, I guess, not to tell her that they brought him back and then he died again. And he's helping Molly, helps her give birth, helping her as she takes care of their baby, Nettle. And at the end of the book, suggests that they should get married because then it would be easier to protect their baby. He could more convincingly tell people that he is the baby's father so the baby isn't going to get pulled into royal issues, potentially be kidnapped or assassinated, used as a piece on the chessboard that this baby could just grow up and have a normal life. And Molly's like, yeah, great idea. Let's get married. Also, I'm in love with you. And Birch is like, what? Really? Me? Old, scarred me? And she's like, yeah, you're actually the one who's shown me most that you love me through actions. And then they get it on. I mean, it's very fade to black. We don't even see them kiss, thank goodness. But unfortunately, Fitz witnesses this. So, great timing. He wants one final remembrance of his love, Molly, and his adopted father, Burrich, before he potentially gives up his whole life to help Verity. And instead of having one final view of his love, well, I mean, he gets that, but he gets to see his adopted father stealing his girl. And listen, I get it. They both think he's dead. I do think it's a little quick, okay? Molly had already been pregnant for a while before Burrich got there, so even if they were together 6 months before Nettle's born, it's maybe been another 6 months or so, if that. So it's been maybe a year that they've been living together. No, that is too fast. I'm so sorry. No. And I'm not against the idea of them being together in general. I think the age gap is a little troubling. I think Burrich having an alcohol problem is a little troubling, considering that Molly was raised by an alcoholic father and is pretty traumatized by that. I wonder how that is being navigated. Did Burrich stop drinking altogether? I don't think we ever learn that. We do see them argue about his drinking. Feels like an unhealthy dynamic, but I could see how they work in a lot of ways. I think Burrich is a nice person, generally. I think that he was showing that he cared about her and taking care of her in a way that no one else had. And I can understand why she would be drawn to that. I think he really loved Nettle. And that's great. I do think, even if you think that your adopted son is dead, moving in on his wife within a year of him dying is too fast. I would even hesitate to say ever moving in on his baby mama would be wrong. So I was very angry when I first read it. I was like, what the fuck is happening right now? Betrayal. What is going on? And then the more I thought about it, I thought, okay, I think it makes sense. They're both grieving the loss of him and they're taking care of each other. They fall in love. Fine. Still, for me, way too fast. I think if they got married to protect Nettle and then it flashes 5 years in the future and they've grown this gradual deep love and care and realize they're actually fully in love with each other 5 years down the line, I would accept it much more. But not only did it contribute to Fitz having a really bad, very terrible, awful, very bad day, it's too fast. I'm so sorry. It's too fast. Even if they fit. And also just an unsettling dynamic, the alcoholism pattern and him being old enough to be her father and him actually being Fitz's father, basically, for all intents and purposes. I'm happy that they're a happy family, but I'm not, it's uncomfortable for me a little bit. Don't love it. This is the one thing that I looked up because I was just so shocked. I didn't even finish the book. I was very careful to avoid any other spoiler, but I had to know what people were saying about Burrich and Molly getting together because I did not see it coming and I was not okay. And it took me by surprise. And it does seem like a lot of people don't love it for all the reasons I listed, but it also seems like a lot of people are like, Fitz and Molly weren't good for each other. Clearly, Burrich and Molly are the better couple, and also Burrich is the best person in the series and the only fully good person in the series, and so he's the best partner for Molly, and I'm not sure I agree. Again, like I said, Burrich is old enough to be Molly's father and is an alcoholic, and she grew up with an abusive alcoholic dad. Just that is a recipe for disaster, and I don't know why it doesn't seem like anyone is addressing that. Did I miss, in my fever dream of reading this entire book in a day, did I miss a mention at some point in these 850 pages that Burrich has totally given up alcohol? Because if that happened, it did not imprint in my brain. But questionable. Also, I don't think Burrich, sure, I would generally say he was a good guy, but he did a lot of questionable things. He also, as much as he was there for Fitz and clearly loved him, and there were a lot of sweet moments between them, he also was kind of a terrible father figure to him in a lot of ways. He abandoned him many times. He was very neglectful in many ways, including emotionally. He gave him the silent treatment and cut him off for having a power that he himself has. There were just so many moments where Burrich expected Fitz to be a fully grown, mature adult man in their interactions, and Fitz was in fact a teenager or a child even, and then Burrich got mad at him for being a child or a teenager and just cut him off or gave him the silent treatment, which is not, I don't think, good parenting. And I don't know. I don't think Burrich is this paragon of virtue, perfect person that it seems like a lot of people, at least in the one thread I read, feel that he is. I think he has many, many flaws of his own, including the alcoholism and stealing his adopted son's grieving baby mama while she's in a bit of a vulnerable time. But anyway, I don't know. Am I totally off base? I don't know. I'm not fully sold on it, to be totally frank. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you are talking about this, just note that you're writing spoilers in your comment and hit enter a few times so that it's hidden beneath the read more so that other people aren't spoiled by our Molly Burrich discussion. But I appreciated how Regal's story finished. I loved that Fitz was able to sort of skill control him to fix as much as Fitz was able to get him to fix, to try to give things back to the people he stole them from, and to apologize directly to Kettricken and put his full weight behind her unborn child and ride out into battle to protect his people and just become a better person. But then also, once he'd fixed everything that he could fix, Fitz decided to have him viciously murdered by a rat in his bed, which is just disgusting. But also, like, he deserved worse, to be totally honest. And I get that Fitz decided to use him to strengthen Ketcherkin and Ketcherkin's future child's place, and to not have any murmurings that Regal could have been a better king or that there's opposition. To have him fully support them is better for the stability of the realm. I get it, but also he got a bit of a redemption arc that he did not deserve. So I think he could have suffered more, but his death was sufficiently horrific, and that satisfied my bloodthirsty soul. So, good job, Fitz. I think the thing that upsets me the most is the Fool's ending, because the Fool and Fitz are soulmates, even if it's not romantic, though it clearly is romantic from the Fool's side, it seems to be. Even if it's not romantic from Fitz's side, they are siblings, they are soulmates, they are meant to be together. Their dynamic through this book was by far the best part of this book, and I adored every moment of it. I love the Fool so much. They are the best character in the series by a country mile. They are incredible, and I'm obsessed with them. I loved that they became obsessed with the girl on a dragon statue, freed it, and then rode it around for a while, becoming a war hero, and then were too embarrassed to be a hero and quietly took themselves off and didn't accept any titles or land or anything and just wanted to be on their own. But I do wish they'd found their way back to Fitz and they could have lived in this little cabin together. Imagine the ending if it had been the Fool and Fitz and Night Eyes chilling in this cabin, and then this boy's dropped off by Starling one day, and the boy gets to live with them happily with their platonic but soul-coupled parents, and just live as their own little 3-person pack like they were for most of this book. I think that would have been such an endearing, lovely ending, and it wouldn't preclude the Fool from having some sort of future adventure. If that is to happen, I really hope that has already happened so I can read those books, because the Fool deserves an entire series of their own. You know, they could spend a couple years in bliss with Fitz and Night Eyes first, and I'm very sad that Fitz doesn't know what happened to the Fool. They never see each other again, at least to the point of future Fitz telling this story. No one else knows what happened to the Fool. I'm not okay with that. That is the one thing about the ending that was not satisfying for me, even though so many of those beats for the Fool at the end were incredibly satisfying, and I loved them, and I loved all the reveals of their backstory, and I loved all of the character development, and I loved every moment that they admitted their love for Fitz and proclaimed their love for Fitz, and Fitz proclaimed his love of the Fool back, and the Fool was so excited and giddy and overwhelmed every time. And I love that we got a kiss on the lips between them. I also loved the Fool going on a long, I think it was like 2 or 3 pages rant about how obsessed the people of this realm are with gender and the gender binary, and how everyone needs to chill out because it's all plumbing and who cares. And also stop asking such intimate questions of people. Just let people live, goddammit. Love the Fool so much. Anyway, that was a very impassioned rant that I went on, but I love the Fool. What can I say? I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I was sad that Verity had to become the dragon, and that Verity and Ketcherkin didn't get to live happily ever after. I am mildly disturbed that Verity and Fitz, as far as I understood it, swapped bodies for a night so that Verity could use Fitz's young virile body / arms that were not magicked to have one last night of passion with his wife and give her an heir. That was mildly unsettling for me. I mean, the foreshadowing was there from the first book that at some point Fitz and Ketcherkin would maybe get it on, but I have complicated feelings about it. We'll just leave it there. Fitz had a rough time there at the end. And, you know, he seems happy with his life in the cabin. I'm glad he and his wolf buddy get to stay together and he's not totally alone. But he does still seem pretty isolated and alone, and he's lost a lot of these characters that he grew to love. I guess he gets visits from Starling, which, to be totally honest, I didn't care for Starling, not only because she was the 3rd woman in a row to get obsessively jealous over Fitz and just be childish about it, but because she just wasn't developed enough. I didn't find her interesting enough. I didn't like her that much, and that's the less important piece of the puzzle. The more important piece is I didn't find her very interesting, and I don't think that her connection to Fitz was as deep and enduring and important. And the fact that she is the only one to come back and visit him is honestly very sad. Shade should be coming back to visit him. The Fool should be visiting him. Maybe Ketcherkin should make a trip out to visit him. Verity as the dragon, if they can even do that, should be coming back to visit him. I would say Burrich, except Burrich thinks he's dead, and apparently everyone thinks that's better, and I'm not sure why. I just feel like he's made all these connections with people, and they meant a lot to him, and then the only one that lingers is this really shallow relationship with Starling, who was kind of the worst for a lot of this book. I don't know. I don't really buy it, and I don't really like it, to be honest. But still, like, there was so much here that I liked so much, and I just think, despite the fact that I have my issues with it, again, those scenes, every single scene with the Fool, and especially every scene with the Fool and Fitz together, was so good that I truly care very little for all the other scenes combined, no matter what happened, you know? I think Ketcherkin is a really cool, interesting character. I would have loved even more of her in this book, but I loved what we got, and I loved her through this whole series. Kettle was a really fun, interesting addition of a character, even though she was annoying in her cagey, not going to share any concrete information, even though that would be really usefulness, but I understand why she felt like she couldn't, and I liked her as a character a lot. I think Molly, while she didn't get as much development in this book because she's just not with them for most of this, I thought that her final confrontation to protect her child by pretending that she was witted and that she had a connection to her bees where she could sick them on people and they would die horrifically from a bunch of bee stings was so badass and incredible and amazing. And I already liked Molly and thought she was a good character, but that just exploded my appreciation for her. I do wish it was true and she was actually witted. I think that would have been a really amazing twist if she actually did have this ability, and also like would serve Burrich right if he fell in love with a woman who was already connected and proudly connected through the wit with an animal with the old blood. Would he finally get over himself and not act like it was some sort of devil heresy and unclean and still get with his adopted son's ex? Or would he continue to be a stick in the mud and abandon her just like he abandoned Fitz over it? I would have liked to see him have to deal with that conundrum, and I also would have loved for her to actually be connected to her bees like that so that she wouldn't have to leave them behind and she could call them to her and have a horde of angry bees to protect her and Nettle for all of time. That would have been amazing. I'm kind of annoyed that she wasn't actually witted because I thought that that was such a great twist, especially because Fitz was so scared to reveal to her anything about his life and anything about his magic powers in either realm. And the idea that she would have just known the whole time because she also had the wit would have been so great. So actually that's another thing that I don't love. But again, I just can't, the Fool is so good. All of those scenes with Fitz were so good that it is good enough to eclipse everything else for me. It just is. I love the dragons coming to life, and also I feel like every animal they talked about coming to life was a dragon, except for one man with antlers and also wings, and then also just randomly a boar with wings. I just loved imagining all of these majestic dragons flying off to battle and one boar with wings, like really struggling to keep up. Just ridiculous, amazing. Spoilers over. This is not a perfect book. There are things that I can critique about it. I could probably continue to pull things out and critique them for another hour, but I'm not going to do that to myself because I need to go to sleep. But I really liked it overall. I loved the Fool and Fitz. So great. The heart of this book, the heart of the series. And I just really loved the series in general. It was really great. 4 stars for book 1 and then 5 stars for book 2 and 5 stars for book 3 for me. None of them are absolutely perfect books. Neither of the books I gave 5 stars are absolutely perfect books, but I loved them. And this was a great experience. I was a bit worried, I'm not going to lie, when I finished book 1 thinking, I mean, it was good, but great even, but is it really deserving of all this intense hype that I've seen? Am I going to let everyone down by just thinking the series is fine? No, I get it. I understand the hype. Yeah, I do. I'm going to read the rest of the series. I will. And then I'll cry that it's over. So anyway, thanks for doing this to me, everyone who recommended this series and Robin Hobb to me. Yeah. my TBR just got destroyed a little bit more. So that is the series. Those are my thoughts. Those are my feelings. Thanks for watching this video. It's almost 5 a.m. and I'm tired, so I'm gonna wrap this up. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you all so much. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know all of your thoughts and feelings and qualms and critiques and where you agree with me and disagree and other things I didn't mention in all of these pages that maybe you want to talk about in the comments. I would love to chat more with you, please. I just saw that Lin-Manuel Miranda is quoted for book 3. That is so random. Anyway, but that's it for me. It is 5 a.m., so I'm gonna go. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave the emoji that you think is most fitting for this series in the comments down below so I know you made it all the way to the end and are a real one. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I appreciate you. Thank you again to Freo for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out their FAQ 202 LED face mask. I have loved using it, and I know you will too. Use the link in my description box and use code 35bride for 35% off. This is a stackable code, so you can use it on top of any discounts or sales already on the website. Definitely check it out. Thank you again to Freo for sponsoring this video, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.